Hi, everybody. I'm Ken Arthur. I recently joined the Talks at Google team, and so I'm here to introduce this talk. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Brian Kesinger. Brian joined Disney when he was 18, becoming the youngest animator at the company. He started as a layout animator on Tarzan, and his career has filled many positions ranging from visual development to story artist. Today, he's going to talk about his career, his art, and his series of books featuring Victoria and her pet land octopus, Otto. So, Brian?
Thank you. Hey, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out today and giving up your lunch hour. It's fun. We have these sort of talks at the studio as well, and I'm usually sitting where you're sitting. So it's very strange for me to be on this side of the podium. So bear with me if I have minor freakouts or I'm at a loss for words. So as you heard in the introduction, I'm currently the head of story on one of our projects at Disney right now. So primarily make my home in the storyboard department at Walt Disney Animation Studios. I affectionately refer to it as the day job. And I've been there now for 20 years. As was mentioned in my intro, I started on Tarzan as a hand-drawn, back in the old-timey days when we drew things on paper. I drew backgrounds for Tarzan. It's also during that film that I started to learn a little bit about computer animation with some of the deep canvas stuff we were doing on that film. From there, I moved on to Atlantis, thank you, and Treasure Planet, again, both in the layout department, but with each film starting to learn more and more computer graphics and how they related to animation. Before I jumped on to Bolt, which was my first all CG film that I worked on, so I transitioned from hand-drawn layout to digital layout, which became more like traditional cinematography on live-action films. And from there, went on to Tangled, Wreck-It Ralph, Big Hero 6, and Zootopia, and I just finished working on Moana, which will come out this fall. So all during that time where I drew for the studio, it was also very important for me to draw for fun. And so I'd always carry my sketchbook around and draw everything from fierce samurai to brooding minotaurs, because I'm a big D&D geek, cyber ninjas, drunk monkeys, more drunk monkeys, and cool dirt bike kids. Then one day someone had contacted me, a good friend of mine, said, hey, I'm having a steampunk tea party. Will you draw illustration for the invitation? And I'm like, sure, what's steampunk? And then I Googled steampunk and found out what it was. And I'm like, oh, that's really cool. And so I did this illustration. And there was something that really drew me to this genre. All the great Victorian fashion was a key component to me that I really love about steampunk. And then all the kind of sci-fi, retro sci-fi elements were really fun for me to play with, and something that I realized I had dipped into a little while working on Atlantis and Treasure Planet. Had kind of that steampunk feel to it. So I already had some muscle memory into it. So I started on this endeavor, which I call the Tea Girls. And these were illustrations that really celebrated the prettier side of steampunk. If you were to look up steampunk, oftentimes it's a lot of post-apocalyptic stuff, or ray guns and big giant robots. And I saw kind of a hole in the genre where it's like, well, let's focus on the pretty things. Let's focus on something that's a little more positive and bohemian. And so I thought, well, why not do that? So to talk a little bit about my inspiration for these pieces, this is an illustrator by the name of Arthur Rackham. Have you heard of him? Pretty amazing artist, kind of known for his illustrations in the original Alice in Wonderland novels, and really cool. As you can see in the art here, it's more about draftsmanship and line work, and the color is more wash, kind of ink washes and watercolor, and the drawing is really the superstar of his illustrations. And I consider myself more of a draftsman than a painter. So when I see people that can do illustration work like that, it really inspires me. Another great artist is Leindecker, and he was a tremendous artist. Kind of similar, I guess, to Norman Rockwell in that he would do a lot of covers for the Post and that sort of thing. But why I like him more than Rockwell is, and it's kind of small on the image here, but things are a little more graphic and stylized. If you were to look at the ringlets of her hair, it's a little more sculptural than photoreal. Still, you look at the image and it looks very photoreal, but there's little tweaks here and there that make it all the more special. Also, what I like about his work is he just includes the props that are necessary for the scene. It's not a full illustration. It's kind of a graphic design. You could see that on a t-shirt or a poster. But everything is there to really set the scene that needs to be there. And you'll see how that has become part of my work as well. Charles Dana Gibson. These are another illustrator who primarily worked in line work. He's creator of the Gibson Girl, which was kind of a very Victorian poster girl for the era. And I just love his work. You look at this, and it's just one solid line of action from the head to the hem of the dress. And everything else in that image really supports the main feature, which is the woman reading the book there. And it's just, all of his illustrations are really good at just being super clear. Even though there's lots of sketchy lines in there, and it's a pretty dense image, your eye knows right where to look between the balance of composition and also value, which is kind of cool. Brian Froud, of course, you guys know Brian Froud. He's a concept designer in the 80s for Jim Henson, and worked on a lot of the work on Dark Crystal and Labyrinth. And I'm a kid of the 80s, so anything 80s is I'm really into. And certainly Brian Froud, I remember getting the art books back in the day when I saw those movies. I was like, wow, this is amazing. And he does a lot of fantasy art, a lot of cool fairies and dragons and these troll guys here. As mentioned before, Mike Mignola, who I didn't know until working on Atlantis. Wasn't familiar with his work because I was more of a Disney geek than a comic book geek. And he was an early concept designer on Atlantis. So I really dug his work and his use of stark values. Again, being a draftsperson and not a painter, I love that most of the work is put into the line work and shadow areas, and then the color itself is actually pretty flat, but still very, very effective. And then, of course, these two, Bill Watterson. My first memory of comics was when my dad gave me the first collection of Calvin and Hobbes. And I was little, and I remember thinking, wow, what a cool coloring book, because all the comic strips were in black and white. So I colored most of them. But that got me to know the art even more, spending time with these two. Just amazing storytelling, and that's something I want to stress with this talk today, is how much storytelling you can get into one image. It's something that we do in the movies at Disney. We control every pixel of the frame, and so you better make sure that that pixel has earned its way into the picture. Well, same thing with drawing and illustration. That's why in older books, there was usually only one illustration per chapter. A picture's worth 1,000 words. It holds true, and every little detail you want to consider before putting in. And these artists that I showed you certainly do all of that. And then I mentioned doing reference into steampunk. There's no shortage of steampunk imagery on the internet. And what was great was when I was first starting out on my T-Girl adventure, these were all strangers to me, but amazing artists. And usually all makers and working in 3D space, sculptural, jewelry, that sort of thing. But there wasn't a lot of 2D art. So I thought, oh, well, maybe there's an opportunity to jump in and play with these guys. And the result of that were these 5 original paintings here. Another thing that was important for me in this process was that since I had made the complete switch to digital animation at work, I was missing the drawing. I was missing putting pencil on paper. And so this was an opportunity to create something physical, something analog, which also played into the steampunk aesthetic in that in this digital age, you have these people that are still interested in having objects. And I thought, well, why create just another piece of digital art that's just a file on a computer and do something special? So I did these 5 paintings, and they're all painted with tea, something that I thought also fit into the genre of steampunk, and using different flavors for different paintings and different shades. I would treat it with just a dab of watercolor, but for the most part, it's tea, and it's what gives it also that splatter feel, that energy to it. Was actually by accident, because I was researching, well, how do you make stuff look old? And the internet told me, well, you age it with tea. And I said, great. And I didn't finish reading the article, but I went and made a lot of tea, and I took a tea bag out and just started squirting it all over the paper. And I said, internet, you lied to me. This looks terrible. And I had already done all the line work because I'm stupid. And the tea went everywhere. But my wife came over, and she says, well, that smells good. And then she said, and I said, yeah, it smells good, but it looks like crap. And she says, no, I think it looks kind of cool. You might as well finish it. If it's already ruined, you're not going to ruin it more. And I finished it, and I actually kind of like how they came out. And it did develop into something that became a signature for me as well, which was kind of cool. As you start to see more stuff make the rounds, you see that splatter effect, and you know, oh, Brian probably had a hand in that. So just to go into the process of these tea paintings a little bit, I always carry my sketchbook with me wherever I go, and I do kind of what I call Ouija board drawing, which is just starting to move my pencil on the page and discovering what the drawing is going to be rather than have an image in my head. And I kind of just move along the page and find different things that interest me, different shapes that interest me. But the main thing for me at this stage is flow and rhythm, not so much form and solid drawing, but just what kind of cool gestures can I get. Once I'm happy with that, I do a blue line sketch on some pretty thick watercolor paper. That's important because I'm going to be putting a lot of tea on it, and the watercolor paper will soak it up and not ruin itself. Once I'm happy with the blue line, I'll go over that blue line with a really thin micron pen. It's like a 0.01 millimeter tip, because these drawings are actually pretty small. Those ones I posted were 5 by 5 inches. And then once I'm happy with that, then I ruin it with tea. And for this one, because it was a steampunk geisha, I decided to use green tea. So it has a little bit, and that's kind of the initial layer where I'm just letting it splatter and pool and do what it wants to do. And then I'll go in with a paintbrush into my tea and mix in a little watercolor and go in and just push and pull values to get to a finished piece like this. So again, it's organic, it's happy accidents, all that kind of fun Bob Ross stuff put into steampunk kind of veneer. These are some of my favorites that I've done over time. Different, flavors, different compositions. This is the one we've seen. And the purpose with those, actually going back to those real quick, because I did stories all day, making stories was my job. I wanted to come home and not make stories. I wanted to just create art that existed on its own and could go in a frame and there say I'm done. But I couldn't help, as I was spending time with these girls, to create stories with them. And I think it was just something in the back of my head that it's like, okay, well, what's this person's story and how do they relate to this person? And so I thought, okay, well, let me try to tell a story in the steampunk world with this aesthetic. And I started to think about how we create stories at Disney, which is thinking about universal ideas and themes. Examples of these are pretty obvious. There's the overprotective parent, which, you know, we all get. Either we have one or we are one. That's an idea that we can all understand. It's when you tell that idea through the world of fish that it becomes very interesting. And animation to me is a metaphor, right? It's a way for us to tell stories. They're fables. There's other, you know, moments in your life, like your first kiss, which we can all relate to. But again, when you do it over spaghetti with 2 dogs, it becomes charming and memorable. And then there can be even deeper emotions, like dealing with guilt. That, you know, when it's a little puppet whose nose grows when he tells a lie, it seems childish and fun, but there's still heart behind it, and it's why we get behind these characters. So I'm thinking about general ideas, what's something we can all relate to. And then my wife and I got a puppy, and we thought, well, there's lots of universal ideas around raising a pet. And I thought, well, okay, so a pet in the steampunk era, what would be a really good steampunk pet? And I thought, well, an octopus, because octopus are amazing creatures, and they had kind of become the theme animal for steampunk, if you will. So I thought of that old classic 1920s illustration where you had the high society lady walking a greyhound, and I thought, well, what's a steampunk spin on that? That would probably be a high society lady with green hair walking her pet octopus to the fire hydrant, obviously. And as soon as you start thinking of your universal idea, then everything just becomes an overlay, right? And the hard work is kind of done, because you think, okay, well, you have a pet. Obviously, they're going to have accidents in the house. And how would an octopus have an accident? Well, they would ink everywhere. Bath time, of course. Otto is the only octopus that actually doesn't like water. So that becomes particularly troublesome for Victoria. And then I went to my sketchbook and I just created a list. This is my writing process. I'm so much more visually driven that the less writing on paper I have to do, the better. But it did help as I was planning out the first book, Walking Your Octopus, a checklist of all different scenarios, both pros and cons. And you can see I couldn't help but even doodle on these pages as well. And then once the boring writing letters part was done, I could go and just start to do these very rough vignettes. Again, going back to the line decker arts. What props do I need to sell the idea? Nothing more, nothing less. And these scribbly drawings then get into even more scribbly drawings. This is, can't you tell? It's Victoria offering a fish to Otto if he sits up pretty, obviously. But the main thing for me in this sketch is A, the idea. Okay, she's training him with a fish. And B, what's the compositional elements in this? And you can see that long line, just like in Gibson's work, of her arm, and contrasted by the squiggly line of Otto looking up at the fish. So you get a nice triangle composition. So once I have those notes down for me, that's the hardest part. That's done. Then I can go and make it look pretty. But this is the more boring part for me, where it's just, okay, finish the line work, finish the colors, but the idea is what's important to me. And with visual storytelling, the idea is the most important thing. I think that's what's great about seeing so much art on the internet, is that it's not about skill necessarily, it's about the idea. Does it make you feel something? Does it make you laugh? Some of my favorite webcomics are not drawn well at all, but I love them, and there's a charm to them. So it's something I like to encourage people with if you have ideas, is to not be intimidated by your skill level. It's the thought that counts. So I thought I'd show this to you guys. It's a time lapse of one of my pieces from start to finish. I draw in Photoshop for these Otto and Victoria pieces just because it's easier to keep digital versions handy if I do shirts and that sort of thing. But we'll give this a watch. It's about 5 minutes long. I'll give some commentary over it, but it's a chance for you to look at art and not hear me. So, but yeah, this was a piece pretty early on. This was actually my second Otto and Victoria piece. And you can see this whole video is about 6 hours worth of work, boiled down to 5 minutes. You can see how roughly I banged everything out compositionally, and now I'm going in and refining a rough sketch. This isn't still the final line, this is still rough. I find that when I draw, the more work I put into the rough phase, that's where all the thinking and weight is, then the easier the rest of the piece goes. So now that I'm happy with the rough, I'm going in and doing more fine line work. So you can see it start to come into focus, like an old-timey Polaroid. And it's in this phase that I'm using kind of all the old school animation line work techniques, thick and thin, thick line at the bottom of an object where there's weight, thin line at the top where there's not, straights against curves, getting the fabric to feel like it's in movement. Little things like here on this umbrella, those little dangly beads. It's one thing if I would have just drawn them hanging down, but because they're kind of an angle, gives some movement to the whole thing. And then suction cups. Millions and millions of suction cups. And this is another example of why you should do your homework, because you can see as I'm drawing these hundreds of suction cups. It wasn't until after this piece that I researched octopus only have 2 rows of suction cups on each of their arms. So that's how you can tell my older Otto and Victoria drawings from my newer is by the suction cups. If there's stupid amount of suction cups, they're early ones. If there's 2, I've done my homework and research. But you can see too, I'm adding a lot of weight to these tentacles, how they're drawn. They feel like there's some mass to them, and the bottom side that's touching the ground is flat, and the top side is more curvy, because this is an octopus that's on land, so it's not going to be as flowy as you would draw them under the water, but they have a little more weight. And so now that the final art is done, final line art, I'm going to go through and do a shadow pass, and this is where we're digging into Mike Mignola territory, where there's these real kind of comic book inking lines, but on softer forms. So it's kind of a fun mashup for me, whereas normally this style of inking is used to draw Captain America fighting Red Skull. I'm using it to draw very elegant ladies and fanciful octopus, and it appeals to me. And again, because I'm a draftsperson, I spend more time on the drawing side than the painting side. As you'll see here, the painting side is mostly pretty flat painting, because all the volume and form is described by the line work and not by the gradients or highlights or shadows. And again, I think it gives it more of an animation feel, which is why when people see this work, not knowing that I work at Disney, say, oh, it reminds me of Disney. I'm like, okay, good. I'm doing something right. The green hair on Victoria was a kind of an afterthought too. So much of steampunk is muted colors. In fact, the joke is steampunk is when goth people discover brown. And so I wanted, again, for my art to stand out in the sea of sepia. And I thought, well, what better than to give a color pop to Victoria and give her that green hair. And what's been fun is at conventions and stuff, when you see people dressed up in steampunk, every once in a while you'll see a girl with green hair. And that's a pretty cool feeling, knowing that you've had some influence on the group that has been so accepting. Steampunk people are amazing. So we're wrapping up towards the end of this. This step right here with all that mottled texture, I had scanned one of my tea splatter pages just with no art on it, so I could overlay it on my Photoshop file to give it a more organic feel, so it doesn't just feel like digital art. So that's where you get all the fun splotches on Otto and Victoria. So that's that. A couple of my favorite pieces from the first book. This is Otto and Victoria at the dog park, because it's very important to socialize your pet octopus. You know, you don't want them being a bad pet. These are all dogs of either mine or my friends and my family, so it's kind of a photo album for us. This is Octopus by the Sea, great for leisurely Sunday boat rides. They're navigators, musicians, and can pour a nice cup of tea for you as well. Octopus love holidays, so the more you can involve them into your holiday routine, the more they'll take to it. So they're really good at jack-o'-lanterns. And then bath time. Of course, he's a gentleman. He's not going to peek, but he is there to help you out at the end of a really, really tough day. And then bedtime. This was certainly inspired by my kids when I would often fall asleep before they did. But the octopus loves to cuddle its favorite submarine as it's off into dreamland being read its favorite story, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. And that is a Cthulhu in the box, just in case you're wondering. Another fun thing to do with these characters is to mash them up with pop culture. I find they cross over really well. They love to cosplay. So any chance I can meld them with my interests is always a win for me. And then the first book got pretty popular. I was really honored by how much it was going around and being shared. And so the time came to do another one. And this was Traveling with Your Octopus. And this was a chance for me to go more global with my steampunk. A lot of steampunk seems to be very European-based, but I wanted to play with that a little. And so I did some American steampunk with the Wild West or the Weird West. Scotland, of course, bagpiping on the moors. In India, playing around, making the trek across the Sahara. The only thing more stubborn than an octopus is a camel. We all know this is fact. Again, in all of these illustrations, even in going around the world, I'm only including the details that I need. You can see they all have this striped background behind them. And it's really just setting the scene, putting the characters in the forefront. I think that's also, personally for me, I spent the early part of my career just drawing backgrounds, that I'm now like, screw that, I just want to draw the characters. And it's laziness. But the really special thing, and what's really touched me, and it's something that being an artist on the internet these days that you wouldn't have gotten even when I started back in '96, is the fan community and people sending you posts or using a hashtag Otto and Victoria, and then seeing this beautiful, amazing cosplay. I had done some steampunk artwork for Disneyland, and we did an opening there. And what was great was this person on the bottom left had dressed up as Victoria at Disneyland. And what was amazing for me, and I still get goosebumps, is when I was walking through Disneyland, I saw her and kids taking their picture with her, one of my characters at Disneyland. It was a subversive kind of, hey, that's kind of cool. And then it continued with amazing tattoos, kids sending in artwork because they love Victoria's green hair. This was kind of a fun full circle mashup for me when someone sent me a Calvin and Hobbes Otto and Victoria drawing, balloon art, because everyone loves balloon art, and my favorite, Otto and Victoria Legos. So pretty cool. But then in the height of this thing, what really struck me is when my friend told me, hey, if you write if you Google walking your, the first thing will be dog, the second thing will be cat, and the third will be octopus. So doing something right. And sharing this anecdote here makes me even happier. So it was this work with these two characters, you know, strong friendship between unlikely people, especially one that can't talk, that got Marvel calling me and saying, we have a couple of characters that we think you'd be really good at. They're very odd and unique friends, and one of them can't really talk. well, he's got a very limited vocabulary at least. Would you mind doing a comic with us? And I thought, no, you guys are kidding. In fact, the first couple emails I got from them I thought was spam, because it just said greetings from Marvel in the subject line. And I'm like, delete. And it wasn't until the sixth one that I actually read it and said that they want to work with me. And I'm like, oh, okay, I'll read through next time. But it was great. Guardians of the Galaxy had just come out last year, and Groot was kind of a runaway character for them, so they wanted to give him his own 6-issue miniseries. And they said that they had seen my Otto and Victoria work and saw how expressive I could get with a character that really only had eyes, and wanted kind of an animated feel for their group book. So these are a few of my pages, and this was my first time doing comic art, and I was really flattered when they told me they wanted me to do pencils, inking, and color, so all the art for the book. And then I got really stressed when they told me they wanted pencils, inks, and full color. Because I'm like, I still work at Disney. And they're like, I know. So I'm proud of the work. I really did treat it like it was an animated movie, using color and tone. This is pretty early on, where Groot really has a desire to see the galaxy. So really wanted to pump up the saturation of that moment. It's a really heightened emotional moment for him. Of course, it's Marvel, so there's going to be big epic battles, especially when they're fighting cyber space sharks. And so, it was fun to do these kind of full-page Marvel-esque drawings, but still in a very cartoony way. Another thing I found in doing this book was, because the characters are so weird, the more we can ground their environment and where they are in relatable places, the more easy it is to digest. It's something we talked about on Treasure Planet. We had this 70-30 rule, where something had to be 70% recognizable and then just have a 30% tweak on it. So if you look at the ships in Treasure Planet, they look like sailing ships. It's not until you look a little closer and you see, oh wait, those are like space engines on the back and they're floating and that sort of thing. So stuff like this, where the script page is called for Rocket and Groot to be discussing their plans in a spaceport. I made it look like a diner and just kind of a roadhouse sort of thing that we could all relate to. This was a fun moment where Groot has a fantasy of joining the Marvel universe, where all the heroes are Groot versions. So you have Iron Groot, Spider Groot, the Incredible Groot, Howard the Groot, and then of course Groot Lactus and the Silver Grooter, which was pretty fun. And of course during this sequence, Groot is totally fangirling, and that drawing of Groot is kind of how I felt during this whole process of drawing it, like I was getting to play with these amazing action figures. In the story, Rocket and Groot get separated, and that presented a writing challenge in that Rocket always serves as Groot's translator. So if you don't have him, how is the reader going to relate? How are we going to get what Groot is saying? And the writer of this series of books, Jeff Loveness, amazing writer, works for Jimmy Kimmel, that's his day job, came up with this great conceit in that the word bubbles, I am Groot, would become the frame for what he's actually saying. It's hard to see in this stage, but he's saying I am Groot in the first page, and the illustration within those letters are Rocket being taken away by space pirates. And I thought that was so clever in that it gives visual subtext, so the reader instantly becomes a translator for Groot, which is pretty cool. This is another fun scene to illustrate how the two met, and some fun visual storytelling here. You can tell on the bottom frame their relationship to each other just by how they're sitting and acting. And on the next page, when you turn the page, you see that Rocket actually stands up for Groot, and we revisit that page, and now they're buddies. And again, all little details, how they're sitting next to each other. It is literally two Here's industry secret here. It is the same drawing. Thank goodness for Photoshop layers. I just moved them together, so that saved me about 30 minutes. This was another fun panel. This is Rocket and Groot reminiscing about their adventures, and it was fun to play around with the framing, something that we don't get to do in film, because in film you're locked into the rectangle, right? Or a square if you're old school. But it's a locked frame for the entire piece. In comics, you really get to blow the doors open on staging, even on this piece using branches to break the frame instead of the normal white bounding boxes. There's a character we meet in this series, and she's called Numinous, and she's the goddess of fate and chance. And when Groot meets her in the story, she's feeling rather guilty because all the fate and chance that she's done has usually turned out bad for these characters in the Marvel Universe. Something as simple as being bit by a spider for Peter Parker ultimately could be argued led to the death of Gwen Stacy, so on and so forth. So she's kind of in a down place. But Groot, in his own special way, reminds her of all the good that has come and all the good moments. And this frame was really hard to work on. The page, the written page described it as, Groot describes all the wonderful things of the Marvel Universe within the words, "I am Groot." I'm like, thanks, buddy. So it took forever to lay out, but I'm really proud of it. And again, it means something. It comes at an emotional point of the story. So it's not just about drawing for drawing's sake. It does have a place in the story and an emotional beat. And I was really happy that I got the 2 Captain Americas in the letter A, just to geek out with all of you. So it was, that time in that part of the galaxy had ended, and it was wonderful. And then I decided to play in another galaxy that was more far, far away. And The Force Awakens had just come out. And again, I love Calvin and Hobbes. And I thought, well, I'm going to mix peanut butter and chocolate together and mash up Calvin and Hobbes and Star Wars, which honestly is not an original idea. Everyone's kind of done their past. There's Doctor Who mashups. There's anything is mashed up with Calvin and Hobbes. Eventually, I want to do a mashup of Calvin and Hobbes with Calvin and Hobbes, just to be meta. But in the meantime, I've been doing this, which was more just kind of overlays of traditional Calvin and Hobbes comics with the new characters. And it was really a fun chance for me to play in Bill Watterson's style. He has such a unique style. I really encourage you guys to look at the art online when you can, or pull out the books that you have, because that guy could draw anything. And drawing a TIE fighter in Bill Watterson's style was a really fun challenge. But it wasn't until I drew this one where Han Solo says, you know, he gets this from your side of the family, that I realized there was a deeper connection between Calvin and Hobbes and Star Wars. And that's, has anyone seen Force Awakens? You guys have seen it? Yeah. So Kylo Ren, spoiler alert, Kylo Ren is the son of Princess Leia and Han Solo. And after watching the movie, I thought, God, he must have been the ultimate problem child. How must it have been in that household growing up? And then I look at the Calvin strips, and you know, the whole idea of those terrible snowmen that he would make, and you know, the fact that he would be using one as target practice is maybe a little dark, but it was funny. And then if you continue that metaphor even further, well, of course, Kylo Ren's imaginary friend would not be a tiger, it would be Darth Vader. And these two in their Star Killer tree fort would plan rebel attacks against the girl, Susie Durkins, or Rey in this case, and her little droid. So again, that whole relationship between Calvin and Susie really tended to play out really well. And it was my first genuine experience of something going viral, which was pretty exciting to be a part of. You know, I did these original 6 images on a Monday, and by Thursday they were featured on Huffington Post, Hollywood Reporter, Entertainment Weekly, ultimately getting a call from Time Magazine. So it was pretty interesting, the power of fandom and the internet teaming together can really do some fun things. Of course, the complicated relationship between Kylo Ren and Rey. Who knows where it ends? You know, maybe they'll be brother and sister like Luke and Leia. Then this will be extra creepy. But worse things have happened in the Star Wars galaxy. And then, of course, the babysitter. You know, mom and dad want a day out, so Uncle Lando's going to come by. So, does your mom ever talk about me? These babysitters are getting worse every time. So it's fun taking quotes from the movie and putting a fun spin on it, childish spin. And then, of course, little Kylo will never go in mother's closet ever again. Bath time is always an intergalactic struggle. The First Order will not stand for this. Your first order is to take a bath. You know, dumb puns like that. But at the end of the day, mom's always there for you to kiss you and your stuffed animal goodnight, no matter how complicated of an issue you might have with your own father. So that's kind of it for my presentation. Do you guys have any questions? Thank you very much.
I noticed that you numbered all the tentacles of Otto, but obviously didn't, you know, they're not included in the final drawing. It looks like you draw all 8 tentacles, no matter the perspective or
Yeah.
angle. Is that on purpose, or?
It is on purpose. And I'll do that on the final illustrations. If I'm signing and doodling, I'll only do 4, just for everyone's comfort. But yeah, I do try to keep track of them, just because it's a fun challenge for me to come up with 8 ideas in one drawing.
Yeah.
And then, like I said, he's a gentleman, so we want to make sure that all 8 tentacles are present at all times.
So actually, we've met before. I'm an artist as well.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, from like Comic-Con and stuff.
Awesome, yeah, good to see you again.
I was really curious when I was watching the play-by-play of the digital art and stuff. First of all, just sort of a double question. What tool do you use to draw into the computer?
Oh, yeah, I forgot. I draw in Photoshop and I use a Cintiq.
Oh, it's a Cintiq.
Yeah, it's a Cintiq.
I'm so jealous of you.
Oh, I'm spoiled with it too.
Oh, I believe it.
Yeah.
I got a Wacom bamboo, so I'll get there eventually. And then I was wondering did you, for the line drawing, you probably don't need it because you're so experienced with drafting, but do you ever use like the pen tool in Photoshop to get that final crisp line?
No, I don't. Yeah, because I have some custom brushes that I've gotten from friends and everywhere, and they're more organic, and I kind of want to fool people into thinking that they're not computer drawings. And there's a warmth there that comes from that. It simulates, the brush I use simulates a Sharpie, which is something we do at work, where you take a Sharpie and you cut the end off of it so that it has a chisel edge, and then you can get a thick and thin, depending on your pressure. So that's what this brush does. So it's limiting in a way, but that's how it should be, because real artist tools are limiting. So
How do you train yourself to get that? Any suggestions?
just practice, because it's
Again,
very
again and
it's
again.
very weird drawing a Cintiq. It's like drawing on ice. You know, there's no tooth to it or anything. So we do most of our storyboards at the studio on Cintiqs. So that's every day, 9 hours a day drawing on it. So you put your hours in and you get used to it. But yeah, don't get frustrated when you first try it, because it does feel pretty alien. But yeah, ultimately you get there.
Awesome, thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, go for it.
So first off, I wanted to thank you for coming here. And
Oh,
I'm sure
thank
that
you.
everyone here agrees.
Yay, thank you.
I'm really happy that I got a chance to come meet you here, because apparently I missed you at the Geeky Teas grand opening, where
Oh, bummer.
I was told that you came and went while I was in the other room.
Yes, yes.
So the question I have is to a degree for my wife, who is
Uh-huh.
she's in TV animation,
Okay.
and they tend to do all traditional animation, still digital but 2D.
Yeah.
And sort of my general question for anyone in the industry is, how do you feel about that shift, where more things, especially in features, have gone to 3D CG, and do you at any point miss the traditional aspects, whether it be digital or on paper?
Yeah, that's a good question. I miss drawing sometimes, which is why I do all this stuff on the side. But there's that great animation book, The Illusion of Life, by Frank and Ollie. One of the they were two of the 9 old men, Disney's original animators, and they did this book. It's like the Bible on animation called The Illusion of Life. And I feel that that's what animation is, the illusion of life. And the more we can do to make that illusion real, the better, which is where I see a lot of strength of CG and where I think a lot of the audience feels drawn into these worlds that we do, especially when you guys see Moana. I mean, the stuff in there is just, it's like all goosebumps. And it's stuff that you can't really get with 2D. That said, I love movies like Secret of the Kells and what's the other one he did? Song of the Sea, by Tom Moore. And I love Fantastic Mr. Fox and Kubo. So like I think there's lots of room. I think what's nice is that there's more diversity in the medium than there was. It used to kind of be like all 2D, and then the outlier was maybe stop motion. But now we're starting to see more, and to me that's a good thing. And what's nice about storyboarding is it doesn't matter if it's a CG production, hand-drawn, or stop motion. It all needs to be storyboarded first. And so for job security's sake, storyboarding's a place that I recommend a lot of artists who really want to draw as their career look into that, and visual development. But does that answer your question in a
thank you.
long-winded way?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Thanks.
Thank you. Anything else? Yeah, Terry. Please step up to the mic.
So I just want to let everybody know that I'm married because of Brian. So yeah.
That was very special.
It was.
And requires some explanation, that sentence.
If just stop by the tea room in bin 5 and I'll tell you the story. It's a great story. Everybody else has had to hear it, but anyway, so obviously like Otto and Victoria and the Tea Girls hold like a big place in my heart. And I was just wondering, because I know how successful your Kickstarter for the Dressing Your Octopus was.
Yeah.
So I was wondering if that's where you plan on kind of ending with those characters, or if you have any future plans for Otto and Victoria or for the Tea Girl series.
I do actually, for both. Thank you. And yeah, we're working on. Oh, I'm doing a third book. So I just did a paper doll book. That again, in embracing kind of the old world toy and steampunk vibe, I thought, well, why have a real toy when you could have paper dolls? Because that's what they would have had back then. So I talked to my publisher, and we decided to do a Kickstarter for a paper doll book that went really well. And but I'm doing another narrative book. So I did Walking Your Octopus, Traveling with Your Octopus, and I'm doing a third one now called Time Traveling with Your Octopus. So I get to do medieval punk and Rokoko punk and future punk. So as I expanded the world in the traveling book, I hope to expand over time with the traveling book. And then I'm really excited because I'm big into tabletop games. So we're working on a Otto and Victoria board game. So that's going to be really fun. And I'm really excited to do the art for the boards and the cards. And it's going to be a million components, but
You just made my year.
yay, yay. So, and we'll probably be playtesting at Geeky Teas too. So.
Yes, I'm going to be there.
So,
I have green hair because of you.
Awesome.
Yeah, all right.
Thank you, Tam. Yeah.
Just want to keep this short, but since that you mentioned now that you're going to be doing time traveling, would you ever consider taking them into the world of Hayao Miyazaki?
Oh, that would be awesome.
I think that would be great.
Yeah,
I
in
would love
fact-
to see that actually.
Yeah, yeah.
Like
no.
a spin-off of Calcifer or something from.
Yeah. Oh, that would be awesome. No, I love those movies, and actually, I'm trying to think. I haven't done a mashup of them with them yet. There
Yeah,
seems
I
to
mean
be-
that'd be cool. I mean, I'll look out for that. I just-
Yeah,
It
yeah.
got me excited because once you said that, I was like, I was gonna see if I was gonna ask you if you're gonna ever visit that world, but now that you said that you're gonna do time travel, if you're gonna throw that in there,
Right.
awesome.
Oh yeah,
But yes,
Mononoke
thank you.
Victoria would be
It was
awesome.
great to sit here and listen to your story and everything.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Cool. Oh yeah.
Hi, love your art.
Oh, thank
Really
you.
exciting. So one of our family friends is a student at Art Center studying visual development.
Oh, great.
And one of the questions that came up was, as a person working in an animation studio like Disney or DreamWorks, how much of that art is actually visible to the public? Do those visual development layouts actually show up in the movie, or is it all sort of digitized, and is there art just for people who are working internally?
Yeah, it's more that. It's more internal. It's funny. Visual development and story are more invisible art, right? Like they're very important to the process, but ultimately they're just a step to the final goal. The nice thing about visual development is they usually put out art books for these movies, and that's the bread and butter for those books. Is all the beautiful visual development. So it does get seen, and but it's usually in that form. But if the painting itself isn't seen, it's certainly felt. All the information that's put in there, all the knowledge of color, of scale, all those principles are what make a movie like what we do at Disney look as rich as they do, because we have these visual development people that are just, you know, fine artists to start, and then they get into animation. I caution people. It's interesting. There's a trend now of people, well, I want to be an animator, so they just go learn animation. But if you look at all the people that started the Disney studios, started the heritage, they were all artists first, and then put their art into the films. So it's tricky because there is a lot more great animation instruction out there, but remember to balance that out and not just make cartoons all day, as much as that's fun to do.
Thank you very much.
Cool, thank you. Well, thank you so much, guys. I really appreciate your time. Thank you.